Thank you for being here and taking the time on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. to listen what I have to say. Now, I'll first start with an apology because even though it might be 10 a.m. where you guys are, I'm based in Brazil, but currently I am in Buenos Aires, and here it's just a few minutes after 5 a.m. On a Sunday morning. So it's a little bit early. So forgive me if my train of thought goes astray on this at this early hour, but I'll try to do my best to stay coherent. And maybe in Buenos Aires, it's even more relevant at this time because Saturday night partying starts typically only after 2 a.m. So the first people maybe only starting now in the clubs of Buenos Aires. But the wine and the parties notwithstanding, let me start by talking to you about From Streets to Screens, Resisting the Commercialization of Movement. Now I'm going to switch to my presentation and I will stop seeing you. So that means that if you have a question, you're welcome to intervene at any point, but I won't be able to see you raising your hand. So somebody would have to grab the mic or we wait until the end for questions. So I would like to start with a perhaps deceptively simple question, even though I'm also, I believe, preaching to the choir, so I might not need to elaborate as much as I would in other situations. And the question is this: when you walk through the city, who really decides where you go? That's where the preaching to the choir comes in, because probably you are all very aware that in a built environment, our movements tend to be directed by urban planning, commercialization, and increasingly, and that's where I'm going to go with this presentation, by digital technologies. Johannes introduced myself earlier, but I'll expand a little bit on this. I'm one of the co-founders of an NGO called Walk, Listen, Create. Some of you might be familiar with this. We were founded 5 or 6 years ago. And Walk, Listen, Create is the home of walking artists and artist walkers. That is to say, creatives who in one way or the other use walking as an integral part of their artistic practice. I'm also the co-creator and maintainer of a mobile app called Dari app, which is based on the ideas of the Situationists. And I will get to that in a second about the app. But the story that I am telling you now is really about how the ideas of the Situationists from the 1950s and 60s are increasingly applicable today in the data-fied city. And you might be familiar, you probably are familiar with the dérive as both a playful and critical methodology. And I make the case that we can now, or should now, extend this into the digital realm. Presentation mode, I have to figure out how to go to the next slide. Yes, that works. So first, a step back, a little bit of context. What is psychogeography, or maybe a refresher? It is the study of how environments shape our emotions and behaviors, or in a simpler way, psychogeography is how a place makes you feel. And the connected concept with this, or the connected tool or methodology, is the dérive, which is a drifting without a plan, guided by chance and effect. And this comes from the idea or the concept of psychogeography, and the methodology of the dérive goes back to the Situationists, who in the 1950s and 60s identified cities as being shaped by capitalism to encourage shopping, efficiency, and spectacle. And so the critique that the Situationists brought forward was a critique of consumption, the consumption shaping the experience of the individual in the built environment. And with the dérive and other tools that they developed, they tried to facilitate a way to reclaim autonomy by the individual through moving against the grain. Now, that same logic, I argue, of the 1950s and 60s of the public space being commercialized has expanded today, or really over the last 20 years, into the digital realm, that is our private spaces. Whereas the Situationists resisted the commercialization of urban space, big tech today pushes the commodification into our private lives via screens, apps, and constant digital mediation. And it is here that, yes, this presentation and my central point connects to one of the themes of our conference here in Switzerland. And that is through the theme, and now I'm going to try my German, of digitale Mobilität und die Zukunft des Gehens. Gehen als hybridisch Phänomen zwischen physischer Bewegung und digitaler Steuerung. That is to say, in short, or my interpretation of that is walking, is to see walking as a hybrid. And that's because more and more walking in a built environment is now shaped simultaneously by physical design as well as by digital overlays, and more by digital overlays. Oh, it's too fast, sorry. And very practical examples of how this is achieved, this manipulation through digital overlays, is by digital navigation, such as tools like Google Maps or Apple Maps or other mapping applications, gamification like Pokemon Go or Ingress, or geocaching, which itself moved from the analog to the digital, and surveillance and tracking tools like Fitbit and Strava and other data and data monetization tools. So digital overlays now script our physical movements as much or more so than features of the built environment or architectural design did or has been doing since from the post-war World War II period onwards. And so we should ask ourselves, when we follow these apps, when we use these apps to navigate, are we walking freely or are we being walked? Now, one of the ways in which I mentioned earlier, the Situationists pushed back against this manipulation in the public space was the methodology of the derive. And I mentioned also earlier that 14 years ago or so, I was one of the creators of an app called Derive app, which was inspired by the ideas of the Situationists. It's a mobile app, you can download it. It's on the App Store for iPhone and Android. And it's been used since then by over 70,000 people who have, every day people use it. And how it works is it provides random prompts or tasks for breaking the habitual or commercial patterns. And it functions through breaking the algorithmic logic of efficiency, consumption, and control. And so it's a kind of, or it facilitates a kind of playful resistance. And through that, it turns everyday navigation in the public space into a critique of how we are being controlled or manipulated in the public space. This is not the only way in which you can do this, particularly if we talk about digital tools that we might have at our disposal. You can consider things like a kind of algorithm disobedience walk, which uses GPS to not do what the GPS tells you to do. You could consider a kind of data shadows mapping, where you use notifications or ads to change how you behave in the public space, but not in the way that the notifications or ads maybe tell you to. You could consider a kind of reverse geocaching, but the derive works with prompts that are presented to you as an individual. And if this might sound like you are going to miss out on all the interesting things in the public space, if you refuse to go to the things or the places that might be interesting, I am very much reminded in this context of a quote by the academic Laurie Waxman in her book on the history of Fluxus, Situationists, and the Surrealists, where she says, if something appears boring, you're just not looking hard enough. And so if we consider these tools as ways to implement digital derives, they resist, what they are doing is they resist imposed algorithmic logic as much as physical derives, what the Situationists originally came up with, resisted urban planning. All right. So a few practical examples. I mentioned the Revab, the thing that I developed a long time ago and is still available. With the Revab, we regularly, occasionally, host workshops in cities where participants discover unnoticed aspects of their surroundings using the app as a tool to do so. There is in Amsterdam, as another example, the Amsterdam Drift Club, which creates collective derives and turns them into artistic events. There is in the UK, it might be in Manchester, but I might misremember this at the moment, a group called Coded Geometry, which is a walking collective that extends psychogeography into the digital realm, mapping physical space alongside digital infrastructure like underground fiber optic networks and using that to navigate as an individual through the city. An example that I love is from a German artist whose name now escapes me, who in 2020 pulled around in Berlin a cart with 100 Android phones, all enabled with Google Maps, which as a result created traffic jams, or at least the perception of traffic jams wherever he would go, because 100 Android phones together made Google believe that 100 cars were piled up in a single location. So he managed to manipulate how Google perceived the city, and through that they redirected traffic in Berlin as a consequence. There was also, this is already a while back, the Yellow Arrow initiative in the US, which was an initiative where you could order stickers of yellow arrows with a code on it. You could stick them on the wall or you could stick them on the floor pointing to something, and then the code, unique code that was on there, allowed you to leave a message for that place and for others to retrieve those messages that others had left, creating a kind of alternative to bronze plaques, or in the UK, the blue cultural history plaques that you see on many buildings. But user owned, if you will. Another example is Converse Snitch by Brian House, a project where he replaced light bulbs in the public space with microphones. And the last example that I want to mention is the Transborder Immigrant Tool by the Electronic Disturbance Theater, although this was never fully implemented, but this was a mobile app which was designed to help migrants on the Mexican-US border to have access, to give them access to information on where they would be able to get drink, where they would be able to get food, where they would be able to get transport to navigate themselves across the Mexican-American border. Now, what all these examples have in common is that they show that walking or moving through the public space can be reimagined as both play and protest by subverting the technology we use to facilitate our movement. And so the question that I'm going to now with the presentation is, how do we reclaim not just the streets, but also the interface, because of the commercialization of the private space through the interface? How do we reclaim ownership of that interaction? Now, to illustrate how I believe that we can take back that control is, I'm going to put two quotes together from Steve Bannon, one from Steve Bannon and one from Guy Debord. Guy Debord was, of course, the central character in the Situationist movement, and Steve Bannon is a bit of a firebrand, but also was the campaign manager for Donald Trump in the 2015 election cycle for the US presidency. Now, Steve Bannon famously at the time said that Steve Bannon at the time identified not as a supporter of the Republican Party, identified not the Democratic Party as their real opposition, but he said the real opposition is the media. And he said the way to deal with them is to flood the zone with shit. And this is exactly what Bannon has been doing and is still doing, and what Trump has been doing ever since and is still doing. He comes up with absurdist comments or ideas, and by the time there is any pushback against these absurdist ideas, the next absurdist idea has already been sprouted by Bannon or Trump, which allows them to keep control of the narrative. Now, in opposition to this, in 55, I think, Guy Debord said in one of his publications, we must try to flood the market with a wave of desires whose realization can be achieved through the available means of action of the material world. Now, this doesn't sound as nice as the short quote by Bannon, but what it means, or what de Boer with that was saying, that he was arguing that instead of reforming old institutions or changing the way we were interacting, what we should do is we should create new desires that can be realized by what is already around us. That is, or change what we have at our disposal and use these tools at our advantage to the detriment of those who want to control us. At the time, when de Boer was saying, he was identifying that desires were channeled by urban planning, the physical space, advertising, and mass media. And the derive was one example of through which we as individuals could facilitate a kind of counter practice. It produced playful longings for exploration and freedom, realized simply by walking differently. And so how that works in practice, or what that then means, in other words, is big tech in Bannon's style today scripts desires through algorithms, push notifications, and endless feeds. And to flood the market in de Boer's meaning of this term would be to see desires for curiosity, slowness, and serendipity. Desires we can realize using the devices and infrastructure we already hold in our hands. So perhaps to reemphasize, the Situationists remind us with those quotes and with those ideas, but transported to where we are now, that resistance doesn't come from waiting for new systems to be built, but from repurposing the material means at hand, whether that's the streets that we move through or the screens that we have in our hands, allowing us to move towards new liberating desires. And so we're starting to wrap up, where in the 50s and 60s, public space was commercialized by big capital through malls, billboards, and privatized squares. Private space now, what we have on our phones, what we think is a private environment, is commercialized by big tech through apps, notifications, and trackers. So with a background understanding that walking can become political when it resists these logics of control, if we reframe it, walking as critical, playful, and disobedient. But now that the arena in which this control has changed from the physical to the digital, or more and more from the physical to the digital, we also will need digital psychogeography, experimental, playful, collective practices that map these new freedoms for us onto both the street and the screen. And so, wrapping up, I see the derive as a tool, as the leitmotif here in this resistance, and the derive as a bridge between Situationist legacy and current digital critique, or critique on digital environments that are being pushed onto us. Because moving through public space is seldom neutral. It is guided, nudged, and commodified by signs, brands, algorithms in the public space, and more by service in the digital space that all extract value by others from us. And so the choice that we have is whether to follow these scripts written for us or to drift beyond them, ground as well as through our phones. And now I'm going to close with another question, and that is really a question to you. And that is, in practice, how do we disrupt the intentions of big tech and take back control by repurposing what big tech uses to manipulate us to our benefit? And that's where I would like to leave it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You're really the first lecturer here during these 3 days of walking who ends up with a question to us. But first of all, I think we can also start with a question to you first of all. And when I would like to start, because it's your opening of course, a very new debate in our seminar concerning these political aspects of this commercially driven walking, which we are all captured, consciously or not consciously, so perfectly driven. For me, the first question, if I open to you, would be how this new style of um, political aspect of walking becomes also powerful. So how we can create with that really a change of this so strongly dominated um, attirement of our walking activity, which is physically a freedom activity because everyone can make the choice. If I want to walk or not, if I want to come into movement or not, but that political aspect become also powerful against these big tech-driven aspect of commercialization. So I give back a little bit the question that you maybe raised for us.
You dropped out a few times in you asking your question, so I'm going to rephrase what I think I heard. Your question is how can we push back in practice against this manipulation?
Yeah, how this political sense of walking that you described with these situationists, how this will become also powerful in the sense that it will be really also attire a lot of people and creating maybe really this political change.
How can it lead to political change? Um, um, in the end, I believe it's really very much about awareness, because what the situationists also identified in the 50s and 60s, and what we have more and more a problem of in the digital realm, is that we are being told what to do without realizing that we are being told what to do. And so that opens up the possibility of this manipulation. If we don't know that we are being manipulated, we also cannot push back against this manipulation. And that is not to say that everyone in the world who disagree with the political systems that are being imposed on them, but what it does imply is that the large swaths of people have never given thought to what it is that they really would like to see society shaped as, because they are being manipulated and accepting it in a particular way. So if we are able to facilitate this, if we, you, me, are able to facilitate this awareness, how we are being manipulated, we can think about what it is that we really actually want to see in reality, in practice, based on what our own desires and interests are. And if we are able to point to this manipulation, whether it's in the public space or the private space, we are facilitating that awareness. And then we are able to generate a discussion around what the individuals really would like, what us as individuals would really like to see society shaped as. And so that is, I think, how this can then change or lead to political change. Which is then a change towards or a change that reflects the actual desires, interests, and needs of the people at large. Does that answer your question?
May I just, yeah, of course. May I just add another aspect of this commercialization? The role you mentioned now, the role of each individual, who makes he has to get rid of and be aware of that happens. But what could be also the role of the urbanists? Because we are here also many people here, participants, which are involved in urbanism, in spatial planning, and so on. What could be the role for this deliberating of the because they have the power, to drive or not the people to freedom or not freedom.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Well, this is more a question for urbanists than for me, I think. But there's plenty of inspiration that can be had. And I'm not an architect, I'm not an urbanist. But if we go back to architects like Le Corbusier or you see now I'm paying the price for being up at 4:30 in the morning. The most famous Brazilian architect. That's terrible. I'm doing a quick Google.
Niemeyer,
Oscar Niemeyer, yeah, of course. Thank you very much. You see, I'm not an architect nor an urban planner. But indeed, Oscar Niemeyer and Le Corbusier both are examples of people with strong visions that really focus on empowering the individual in the public space. And we can argue about whether their visions are right or wrong, but the point here is that they had idealistic ideas and ideals about how society needed to be shaped, and use those ideals in their work to attempt to realize these ideals. So they were urban planners or architects, but very much related to the field of urban planning. So
I'm sure that the presentation, Babak, opens also a lot of questions here. Yes.
First, thank you very much for the really insightful talk. It was really rich of many interesting remarks. I just had a question because I didn't hear the organization mentioned at the beginning that you are part of, like a walkers collective or something. Not the app, but something
or something.
I just
the organization is called Walk, Listen, Create. It's a network organization. That is to say, we facilitate creatives who use walking as an integral part of their artistic practice. It's free to join. You can go to the website, walklistencreate.org. And we currently have a network of over 2,000 contributing members.
Very impressive.
Please comment.
I don't know. I just had this thought of how do you think what pandemic made with people somehow as an introduction into the way to move day, and what would be a kind of a digital pandemia somehow also that confronts us that things are not working anymore somehow, or it's not really a clear thought, but it's kind of try to compare things happened that shaped our behavior and routines. And because you were asking us, what was your question? What forms of change? And yeah, maybe we got up not that early, but yeah, it's maybe also not.
Maybe it's already too late.
That's not the true. No, we are high up in the mountains.
So the air is thin. I'm at sea level in Buenos Aires, where the air is good, right? But so is it. I'm sure in Switzerland. Well, not. Yeah, it's not really a question, right? So it's more like a thought. But what I'm now reminded of with what you're saying is that how expectations have shifted of lots of citizens over the last few decades, is how our needs and desires are we expect our needs and desires to be immediately fulfilled. There has to be, with lots of the interactions that we have, there has to be an understanding that immediately we are supposed to be able to reap the benefits of the things that we do. That is to say, we can't wait 5 years for a political process to finish to be able to deliver what the promises are. And I do think that this is something that has increased or gotten worse during the pandemic. We all expect immediate change, from the policies that are enacted, whereas some things take years to be implemented. And that is the result of the average citizen not understanding or not realizing the difficulties in actualizing shifts in society. And this comes back to that lack of awareness, or that impression that's generated by big tech that that desires need to be immediately satisfied. Because when you scroll through your feed, you need to immediately be able to get those dopamine hits. And that's just not how reality works. But in the pandemic, everyone was on their phone getting dopamine hits immediately. Yeah, well, not really an answer, but also a thought.
So I thought I'd share, I'm not exactly sure if it's a political hack, but I guess I turned something that wants to sell me or advertise booking information into a game. Because with the booking app, you always get like pictures of all these places and like the best sort of rooms and the best hotels and these idyllic sort of landscapes. And I realized that it was actually kind of interesting because it does it randomly. So you get like different zones and different backgrounds and different architectures. So now I've taken to using this app just to play like, where am I? Where is this place in the world? And there's a similar app, it's called GeoGuessr. That works with Google, with Street View, where you just get like thrown out somewhere in the street of somewhere in the world, and then you compete online with other players to see where you are. So I guess I turned the booking app into that. So and then I have another question, because somehow you talk about using this sort of digital or technology in order to as an incentive for new ways and new ways of walking. But how about finding new ways of walking within the digital realm? No, and there's all these different games. It has a lot to do with games, no, in the game community, and it's also connected to COVID, because you had like this like second world, where suddenly people were meeting in public spaces within the digital realm. So what are your thoughts on this other side of using technology as an incentive of new ways of walking?
Well, if we talk about new ways of walking in the physical space, this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? If we're talking about new ways of walking in the actual digital space, I'm not so familiar with the games, but you used to have Second Life. This is a long time ago, but that was a digital space where people could freely move around in, which is an example, I think, of what you're describing. There's also, I know that Firefox or the Mozilla Foundation had an environment where you could virtually meet as an alternative to Zoom. So you would move around in a virtual space. It was a 3D environment where people could meet. Well, in the end, these 3D, well, they don't have to be 3D environments. These open worlds, they are completely mediated, right? They're completely constructed. So whatever you're doing in these virtual worlds, even if you decide not to follow the protagonist's movements as you are supposed to finish the game, you are still doing everything in a world that is completely constructed around extracting value. These are commercial environments, the vast majority of them, that are designed to make money. So yeah, you will never be able to escape. It's a bit like being caught in the Matrix, but then trying to stay in the Matrix and pushing against Agent Smith's legs, right? That's not to say that lots of people actually do play, I don't know, what is it, Red Dawn Redemption or something, by not following the script, but by watching the scenery. I think that's great. Do with these tools what makes you happy, not what others tell you to do to make them happy.
Thank you very much. It's also the time in Switzerland is passing very fast, even at Sunday morning, even that it's not at 5 o'clock in the morning. But just one small question at the end, because we have, unfortunately, to finish, even that it's so fantastic and so interesting, your task. Yes? And the very last there. Yeah. I start here. Yeah, with the woman.
I really appreciated how you said that we are being walked, do you know, sometimes that without realizing it. And I think also interested in the sense of whether it's, you know, in the digital realm or also in the physical, kind of how limited, do you know, there is this sort of manipulation or these ideas of that keep us very limited in our thinking and very limited of what's possible, but
exactly
offering the full expect. And I think looking at ways of organizing, or something that I'm also really interested in, is how to open up, you know, like I think also Martin, he was saying today, opening ourselves up to all of those possibilities and kind of not letting a system dictating, but it's not even an anti-fascist or an anti-system, do you know, it's somehow finding more the cracks. So ways that in your work, I think you found those cracks or those abilities to I think explore those other possibilities, because it's not an against. I think this is an important point somehow.
Well, I mean, for me personally, it's also an against, but indeed, the point that I'm raising really is this facilitation of the awareness. Whatever or whoever is using my apps or whatever their political ideas are, I don't really mind. What I do mind is that they are being restricted by the tools that they think are freeing them. So I want to facilitate this awareness, make them aware that they're being manipulated, and then they can more easily make their own choices. That is what matters.
Thank you for the talk. I just wanted to ask that I think a lot of things you're saying, you're actually pointing to the problem is not necessarily just about the interface. It's not even just about, you know, digital per se, but it's more about the political and social kind of relations behind it. And that's something we'll have to be aware of. So in that kind of sense, it's not really about moving away or moving more into the digital or the physical, but actually trying to challenge that kind of the relations behind it, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're aware of some other kind of movements going on which are more actively or proactively trying to kind of contribute or maybe to correct those relations in the digital space. For example, like there are people using a lot of, you know, cryptography and trying to do the decentralization of the different ownerships online, and they are contributing to the so-called metaverse or the universe in the digital world in a more libertarian or anarchist way. And how do you see that kind of movement going on, and how does it contribute to your research and our questions here?
Ooh. Give me an easy question, will you? Well, first of all, there is, I believe, not getting a bad action. I'm hoping I'm still with you. There is, to my knowledge and experience, not a lot of movement online around this concept, except perhaps indeed, as you point out, movements that are more libertarian, that are very individualistic. And I am not personally a huge fan of libertarian thought. I think it's very misguided because it is very individualistic. And that also, I think, is not at all what, if we look at the context of the presentation that I gave earlier, it's not at all what the Situationists, but also maybe you could call them their spiritual successors, Fluxus, were propagating. They were, if anything, very, well, maybe only socialist, but maybe even communist. So very collective in their world view. That is, everyone needed to be, they devised ways to allow everyone to be included. And libertarianism is the exact opposite of this. It's everyone for themselves. So, yeah, I think what is more an example of the kinds of movements that we would need to be looking at is movements that actually bring people together, or who subvert the system to subvert this individualistic outlook on how society is supposed to work. And that's also exactly this individualism, which these tools, the Facebook feed or whatever, tries to propagate. They want everyone to be individuals, so that they are not able to collaborate and collectively push back against this control. But I don't have concrete examples.
Thank you very much, Babak. I'm sorry we have to close up for the next lecture. Thank you very much. Just to end up, also, it's perfectly matching with also the thesis of Lucius Burckhardt. Huh? In his name, we are here also making this seminar of Storelli, and he differs this triple viewing. So the first part of perceiving visually is the information gaining, the second is the physical gaining, and the third one is the symbols, the recognition of symbols and aspects. And so I think you're really focusing one of these crucial aspects of this triple viewing, huh? Which we are not so aware of it because we are all driven by information. Thank you very much joining us, and have a good day or night. Regaining night.
No, the day is starting. I'm looking forward to a relaxed Sunday in Buenos Aires.
Okay, fine. Best greetings to Buenos Aires. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.